In a matter of hours, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman went from rising star and one of the most vocal champions of the Me Too movement to accused offender. And mere hours after a bombshell report came out in the New Yorker, he was out of a job. In the story, 4 women who said they were romantically involved with Schneiderman described being slapped, choked, and emotionally abused by him. Michelle Manning Barish, one of the women who went on the record, described repeated instances of physical violence in vivid detail, telling the magazine that one night, quote, all of a sudden he just slapped me open-handed and with great force across the face, landing a blow directly onto my ear. Another woman, Tanya Selvarotnam, shared similar stories of abuse, saying Schneiderman regularly beat her during sex, called her names, and told her to get plastic surgery. Ultimately, she told the magazine, quote, I began to feel like I was in hell. Both women also said Schneiderman threatened to kill them if they broke up with him. The report paints a far different picture from the man who just months ago publicly took on Harvey Weinstein and his company over the sexual assault accusations against him.
We have investigated other companies for patterns of sexual discrimination or harassment. We have never seen anything as despicable as what we've seen here.
Schneiderman has also been a thorn in Donald Trump's side, leading the charge, along with Massachusetts AG Maura Healey, on a number of lawsuits against the administration. Schneiderman ultimately resigned after New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and Senator Kirsten Gillibrand called on him to step down, saying, quote, serious allegations, which I strongly contest, have been made against me. While these allegations are unrelated, he said, to my professional conduct or the operations of the office, they will effectively prevent me from leading the office's work at this critical time. I'm joined by 2 former Massachusetts attorneys general. Martha Coakley, whose tenure here overlapped with Schneiderman's in New York. She's now a partner at Foley Hoag. Hey there, Martha.
Hi, Jim.
Scott Harshbarger, Martha's former boss, who is now senior counsel at Kasner Edwards. Scott, it's good to see you, too.
Nice to be here, Jim.
You overlap, what, 5 years? Was that?
4 years.
Are you surprised?
His first term was my his first term was my last term.
You surprised by what you read?
I am. I knew Eric, and I was a colleague. I was supportive of what he did. He was helpful to me when I ran, but I'm not surprised by anything anymore.
Yeah, and Scott, his wife wrote a letter, his former wife, pardon me, saying this doesn't represent the man I married, the father of my kids, my friend, etc. You prosecuted a lot of these kinds of cases when you were the DA and subsequently. That's not that unusual to hear, even from someone who has done what he's accused of.
No,
right?
It's not. And actually, most recently, Jim, I've seen it in terms of these independent investigations in the independent schools. You'll see a faculty person who to 9 out of 10 of the students was a model, was never a problem, but as to the one person that he or she addressed as a became a predator, that person was a monster. And that's the irony of this thing, is that the personal conduct may not have been seen by many, many people. And there's no reason to doubt what his wife said in terms of his character related.
Sort of like what Megyn Kelly said about the 60-some co-workers of Tom Brokaw, and her response was, you don't know what you don't know. Right. Do you think the repercussions of this go beyond those felt by Schneiderman himself? He was leading the charge nationally on a lot of this anti-Trump stuff, obviously a vocal male supporter of Me Too. Does it begin and end with Schneiderman, or does it trickle down somewhere else?
And I think one thing people underestimate is the extent to which offices like New York or Massachusetts have professional staff who are committed. AGs come and go in some respects, but the public service work of the career people who are there, or some who are there for a short period of time, good litigators, smart lawyers, they're committed to their mission. Maura Healey will pick up the charge on Mobile Exxon. We know that A.G. Ferguson in Washington, the former A.G. in Hawaii, many Democratic A.G.s and some Republicans will continue to work for consumer protection and anti-Trump. And there's an election in the fall, and I think you will see some new Democratic A.G.s.
But it seems to me that when you're the face of something, it's not just that you sign on. You guys, when you're attorneys general, signed on or led charges. But Schneiderman has been the face of a lot of this stuff, as has the California Attorney General, as has Maura Healey. That face gone, and also finding out that he is a hypocrite and arguably a hypocritical criminal. We'll get to that in a second. Don't you think that damages some of the things that he supported?
I think it damages another damage to another institution. One of the things about the state attorneys general, I think it unfortunately has become very partisan, but in many cases these offices, whether Democrats or Republicans, are standing up for consumers, for people without them have no one, and those institutions are being called into question. So what happens here again is that Donald Trump, for example, you know, the gift just keeps on giving to him in terms of another institution that you can't appear to trust, that the people appear to be hypocritical, so don't blame me for being a hypocrite, when the leading attorney general in the country is simply acting out in a way that's totally reprehensible.
And by the way, while he didn't tweet about it, Kellyanne Conway did yesterday. She tweets, Kellyanne last night, gotcha, and then she includes Schneiderman in October of 2017. No one is above the law, and I'll continue to remind President Trump and his administration of that fact every day. I want to follow up on what Scott said a minute ago. Bill Evans, a commissioner, is here pretty often. And while he respects deeply his own men and women, says every time a cop shoots an unarmed black guy in some other part of the country, that taint trickles down unfairly onto my men and women. Isn't he right? Doesn't the taint, when you're that high profile, trickle down into all the people who do what you did, as unfair as you may consider that to be?
I'm going to differ with that a little bit. And I think that, look, in my class when I first came in, there were 3 or 4 AGs within the first year, all men who, because they were having affairs, they violated Title IX, whatever it was, were gone.
Is Elliot Spitzer, another New York Attorney General, one of those?
He was before me, so
you
he
knew
was
him,
Scott's.
right?
So this is not the first time we've seen this. Look at the current governor of Missouri.
Yeah.
And Kellyanne Conway should be careful because, you know, if you're in glass houses, you shouldn't throw stones. So, yes, it's very disappointing to see this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde emerge. But we see this. I think the good news in this story is that within an hour and a half, frankly, on this story coming out, he had actually resigned. This would never have happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
By the way, Spitzer looks positively presidential by comparison. All he did was cavort with prostitutes with his socks on, right?
Well, I mean, I was going to say to Martha's thing, the fact is...
You'll ignore that. I don't blame you. Go ahead.
But, you know, we Democrats resign when we have some sense of shame, apparently. Other folks just say, I didn't do it, or I'm, you know...
Is that a badge of honor? You assault women, Democrats, and then you have the decency after assaulting them to resign?
I don't think it's a badge of honor. I think this is the irony of this whole thing. I mean, as Martha says rightly, he did resign. Of course it's appropriate that he resign. But again, I think it's an institutional hit here. I think, once again, this whole country is... The state attorneys general in our era, even in our eras, I think we believe, Republican or Democrat, you were an attorney general first and foremost, and you were going to do in the public interest. And now you're another institution seen as being against Trump, as opposed to standing up for the people of the state.
If he did these things, he should go to jail, shouldn't he?
Well,
should be prosecuted and go to jail?
It very much depends on the victims. Let's not forget, there are victims
here. But he
here.
committed crimes of violence if these stories are true, correct?
He did.
You'd prosecute him, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, I think that there's still a factual basis here. And I hate to say it this way, but this kind of thing, was there some consensual activity involved? I don't know, but it seems to me these ought to be considered presumptively crimes. They ought to be considered.
It's classic domestic violence, right?
Well,
not just the physical, but the emotional abuse. It's a horrifying story to read.
You know, you may have been the first person that told me this. When I read the word choking or strangulation, I think it was you who told me years ago, often in domestic violence cases that lead to a killing.
Yes.
This is one of the signs you see
Yes.
When you look back after the woman has been murdered. I mean, so this is not just violence against his temporary partners. These could have been signs, especially with these threats of a guy who might have killed one of these women.
It's a pattern of escalation of physical and emotional dominance that does involve, as you heard these women talk about, the emotional abuse, and they were afraid. They were afraid of him, but they were afraid to tell about him too.
Right.
But that they came forward, and that he resigned in the same night. That I hate to say it, but that is progress for what we've seen, and we need to elect more women attorneys general.
Well,
glad you slipped that in. You have
my
15
wife would like
seconds.
to add the Andy Borowitz thing from last night, which said that we ought to have a rule that for 20 years only women can serve in office, and then at the end of that time we'll evaluate it, and if it looks good, keep it up that way. Keep all men out of office.
Best satirist in America, but in this case he's right. Martha Coakley,
Thanks,
thank
Jim.
you so much.
Right, thanks,
Scott,
Jim.
thanks for your time.